Once upon a time, there lived a brother and sister, little brother and caring sister. Once their house was full of motherly warmth and laughter, but those days were gone forever. Mother had died, and father, blinded by magical spells, brought a new wife into the house. It was not a woman. It was a witch who skillfully hid her black essence. Her gaze chilled the soul, and her words stung like snakes. With her arrival, the house turned into a prison where hunger, beatings, and fear took up residence. Father saw nothing and heard nothing. The spells clouded his eyes. But the children held on to each other. They whispered at night, shared the last crust of bread, and clasped hands before sleep. In this cold, hostile world, their love was the only warmth, the only light in the darkness. That evening, the stepmother, in blind fury, beat little brother. For a broken bowl, for a trifle. When the house sank into silence, sister pressed her crying brother to herself, wiping blood from his split lip. "We cannot stay here anymore," she whispered. And for the first time, her voice held not a plea, but determination. "If we stay, we will perish. The whole world, no matter how scary, is better than this house." Brother nodded, clutching her hand. They gathered their meager belongings: a heel of stale bread, old scarves to cover themselves from the cold. The moon hid behind the clouds, as if not wishing to be a witness. Quietly as mice, the children opened the window and slipped out into the night. Before them loomed a huge forest, ancient and unknown. They stepped into its darkness, and this darkness seemed lighter to them than any day in the house of the cruel stepmother. In the morning, the stepmother entered the nursery and froze. The beds were empty, the window wide open, but she did not scream, did not call the servants, did not wake her husband. Her face turned to stone, and her eyes blazed with inhuman fire. She went into the secret room where no living person had stepped. There, in the gloom, stood a bowl of water, black as a moonless night. The witch bent over it, whispered ancient words, and in the dark depths appeared two children's silhouettes wandering among the trees. Her lips twisted into a snake-like sneer. "You will not escape me," she hissed. "You will regret that you were born into this world." She raised her hands and uttered a terrible spell. The witch did not send a chase of men and dogs. She poisoned every brook, every spring on the fugitive's path with her black curse. Thirst itself became her hound. The children walked all day. The forest, which at night seemed like salvation, by noon turned into a stifling trap. The sun rose high and scorched mercilessly, as if conspiring with the witch. The bread ran out in the morning. But it was not hunger that tormented them. It was thirst. Terrible burning thirst. Little brother walked slower and slower. His lips were cracked, his tongue swollen, a ringing stood in his ears. "Sister," he whispered barely audibly, "I want to drink. Everything inside me is burning." Sister herself could barely stand on her feet. Every step was difficult. Her legs felt like lead, and black circles swam before her eyes. And suddenly, they heard it. A quiet, silvery murmuring somewhere ahead among the trees. Water. A brook. Brother threw up his head, and hope flashed in his exhausted eyes. This sound seemed like the sweetest promise in the world. The brook sparkled in the sun like scattered silver. Its cool murmuring beckoned the exhausted children, promising salvation. Brother tore his hand away and rushed to the water. "Finally!" he cried out, falling to his knees by the bank. But sister froze. Her sensitive heart, inherited from her late mother, caught something terrible in the splash of the water. Through the silvery voice of the brook broke a sinister whisper. "Who drinks of me will become a tiger. Who drinks of me will become a tiger." "Do not drink!" she screamed, rushing to her brother and dragging him away from the water. "Brother dear, do not drink. If you drink, you will become a wild tiger and tear me apart with your claws." Brother looked at his sister, then at the water, and in the transparent depths, he imagined yellow, predatory eyes. He recoiled, trembling with fear. Thirst tormented him even more, but he obeyed. They wandered on, and the cursed brook mockingly murmured after them. They wandered on. The sun burned mercilessly, and every step was taken with agonizing effort. Thirst turned into torture. It burned the throat from the inside, clouded the mind. An hour later, a spring gushed among mossy stones. Water beat from under the earth, clean and cold. "Water," croaked brother and stepped forward. But sister was already listening, and again, through the splashing, a dark whisper reached her. "Who drinks of me will become a wolf. Who drinks of me will become a wolf." "No, brother," she embraced him, holding him back. "I beg you, be patient. If you drink, you will become a gray wolf and eat me." Brother fell to his knees and wept. Tears rolled down his cheeks but brought no relief. In his exhausted body there was no moisture left even for tears. "I will be patient," he whispered with parched lips. "Until the next brook, I promise." They wandered on, and thirst burned their throats with fire that could not be extinguished, for the water in this forest had become more terrible than any flame. Towards evening, when the last of their strength had left them, the children came out to a third brook. It flowed among white stones, and the water in it was so clean, so transparent, that it seemed like salvation itself descended from heaven. Sister listened, and her heart fell. The brook whispered, "Who drinks of me will become a deer. Who drinks of me will become a deer." "Brother, no!" She grabbed him by the shoulders. "There is a curse here too." But brother no longer heard her. Thirst eclipsed his mind, drowned out fear, overpowered even love. His eyes clouded with torment. "I can't take it anymore," he screamed, and in his voice was such pain that Sister's heart broke. "Just one sip. One." He broke from her hands. Where did the strength come from? And fell to his knees before the water. The mirror surface reflected his exhausted face. "Do not drink!" Sister rushed to him, but it was too late. Brother fell upon the water and took the first greedy, fatal sip. As soon as the cool moisture touched his lips, the air around trembled. The boy cried out, but his cry broke off, turning into a pitiful animal moan. Sister watched, unable to move. Before her eyes, her brother was changing. His arms became thin legs. His skin was covered with golden fur, and small horns sprouted on his head. A moment, and the boy was gone. On the bank stood a fawn, small, fragile, with large, sad eyes. Sister sank onto the grass and wept, bitterly, inconsolably. The fawn lay down beside her, put his head on her knees, and tears rolled from his animal eyes. Human speech was gone forever, but the soul remained. Sister saw it, alive and dear in those brown eyes. They were alone in the huge forest, a girl and a beast, a sister and a brother. Sister wiped her tears. Grief is grief, but there is no time to cry. Now she is the only protection for her brother. If not her, then who? She unbraided her braid and took a golden ribbon from her hair, the last gift from her late mother. She carefully tied it around the fawn's neck like a precious collar. "Let everyone see," she whispered, "that you are not a wild beast, but someone's beloved, someone's kin." Then she picked soft reeds by the brook and wove a leash from them, not to hold, but so as not to get lost. The fawn looked at her with his sad eyes, and she sank to her knees before him. "Listen to me, brother. I will never leave you. Where you go, I go. I will be your voice while you are deprived of speech, and protection while you are defenseless." She stood up, took the leash, and led the fawn into the depths of the forest to meet the unknown. They walked for a long time, a day, another, a third, until they climbed into the deepest thicket, where neither a sunbeam nor the gaze of the evil stepmother penetrated. Here ancient firs closed their crowns, and the world of people seemed like a distant dream. And there among the trees appeared an old hunting hut, leaning, overgrown with moss, long forgotten by people. Sister pushed the creaky door and looked inside. Empty, dusty, but dry and warm. "Here we will live," she said, and hope sounded in her voice. She set to work. She swept out the litter, patched the cracks, gathered soft moss and dry leaves, arranging a cozy bed for the fawn by the hearth. Every morning she went into the forest for juicy roots and sweet berries, and her brother drank water from clean springs. Here, in the depths of the thicket, the stepmother's curse had no power, and the ramshackle shack became a palace for them, for in it there was neither malice nor fear. Spring passed, followed by summer. Autumn was replaced by winter, and winter by a new spring. Thus passed the years. Little sister grew up and became a girl of amazing beauty. The forest air and pure water nourished her cheeks with a blush. Sunbeams wove gold into her braids, and her eyes shone like two forest lakes. The fawn also grew. Now it was a stately, handsome stag, with mighty branching antlers and a proud gait. But on his neck, the cherished ribbon still gleamed gold. The forest accepted them as its own children. Birds sat on sister's shoulders, squirrels ate from her palm, and does came to the threshold of the hut, knowing no fear. Time flowed slowly here, like tree resin. Brother and sister were happy in their solitude, far from human cruelty and the witches' schemes. It seemed it would be like this forever. The forest kept their secret as its main treasure. But one morning, the silence of the forest was torn by a distant but clear sound, the voice of a hunting horn, and after it, the ringing barking of dogs. The stag threw up his head. His nostrils quivered. His eyes flashed with wild fire. He was completely transformed, as if something ancient, untamable, animalistic had awakened in him. He ran to his sister and spoke, for the human soul had preserved his gift of speech. "Sister, let me go. I must be there. I can no longer sit locked up when a hunt is going on in the forest." "Brother dear," sister turned pale. "It is dangerous there. There are hunters, dogs, arrows." But the stag beat his hoof on the ground, and in his eyes burned such longing that her heart shrank. She understood. One cannot hold the wind. One cannot lock up a flame. With a heavy heart she opened the door. "Run, but I beg you, return to me alive." That morning, the young king of these lands, eager for excitement and adventure, announced a great hunt. The whole court rose into the saddles, and the forest, accustomed to silence, shuddered from the thunder of hooves, the roar of horns, and the ringing barking of hounds. And the stag raced among the trees, reveling in freedom. The wind whistled in his ears, muscles sang with the joy of running. He was born for this. But suddenly, the hunters froze. The king himself pulled the reins, not believing his eyes. Before him stood a stag of unseen beauty, stately, proud, and on his neck shone a golden ribbon. "This is no simple beast," whispered the king. not taking his eyes off the wondrous creature. Chase him, but do not kill. I want him alive. And the hunt rushed on the trail of the golden collar, and fate itself, turning into a pack of hounds, stepped onto the path. The stag was agile and fast. All day he led the hunters by the nose, winding among ancient oaks, diving into ravines, confusing tracks. The excitement of the chase boiled in his blood. But towards evening, strength began to fade. Legs trembled, breath burned the chest. The hunters tightened the ring. And then one of the gamekeepers, young, hot-headed, did not hear the royal order. The bowstring sang, and an arrow sank into the stag's hind leg. Pain pierced him, sharp as red-hot iron. But the fear of not making it to his sister proved stronger. Limping, bleeding, he broke through the ring of beaters and rushed away. To where the hut waited, where sister waited. He did not notice how one of the royal gamekeepers slipped after him like a silent shadow, noting the red drops on the moss. A guiding thread leading to the secret hideout. The stag reached the hut with his last strength. The gamekeeper, sneaking behind, hid in the bushes, barely breathing. And then the unprecedented happened. The stag approached the door, knocked with his hoof, and spoke in a human voice. "Sister dear, let me in." The door immediately flew open. On the threshold stood a girl, and the gamekeeper forgot how to breathe. Such beauty he had not seen at court, nor in the wildest dreams. Her hair shone with gold, her eyes glowed with tenderness, and her face was more beautiful than the morning dawn. She gasped, seeing the blood, pulled the stag inside, and the door slammed shut. The gamekeeper could not move for a long time. He expected to see a beast's lair, but found gates to a fairy tale, where deer speak and forest goddesses open doors. Recovering, he rushed back to the king to tell of the miracle the world had not seen. The next day the king returned to the cherished place. He left his retinue far behind. He did not want to frighten the forest maiden. He approached the door, hesitated, and pronounced the cherished words. "Sister dear, let me in." The door flew open, and sister froze, turning white as a sheet. Before her stood not a stag, but a stately youth with a golden crown on his head. She recoiled, pressing her hand to her chest. "Do not be afraid," the king said softly, not crossing the threshold. "I came without weapons and without a retinue. I came with an open heart." He looked into the hut and saw the wounded stag lay on a soft bed, and nearby, clean bandages, healing herbs, a bowl of water. A girl in a simple dress with hands stained with healing ointments. And the king understood. He had found not just a beauty, he had found a treasure, a soul full of light and love. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. The king gently took her hand. She flinched, but did not pull away. "Do not be afraid," he said. "I will not harm you. I swear by my honor and crown." He looked at her as if he saw the sunrise after a long night. "I have traveled many lands," he continued, "but never have I met anyone more beautiful than you. And it is not only about your face. I see your heart, and it is more beautiful than all the treasures of my kingdom." He sank to one knee right on the earthen floor. "Leave this hut. Come with me to the palace. Become my wife, my queen." Sister was silent. Her heart was torn in two. She was so tired of the cold, of fear, of loneliness. But what about her brother? How to leave the one she swore to protect? The king's words sounded like a sweet song, but duty held her tighter than any chains. Sister was silent for a long time. She looked at the king. Sincere love shone in his eyes. Then she shifted her gaze to the stag, who pressed against her legs, and in his eyes fear and hope were read. She straightened up and spoke, quietly but firmly. "I will go with you, sire, but only on one condition." "Name it." The king leaned forward. "My stag will go with me. I will never abandon him, neither for the sake of a crown, nor for the sake of love. He will live in the palace, eat from my table, and sleep in my chambers. Such is my word." She waited for refusal, anger, mockery. But the king smiled, and in his smile was tenderness. "Of course," he said. "He will be like a brother to me." In this moment, he loved her even more, for he understood. She was ready to accept the crown only if that crown would cover with its shadow the one she had sworn to protect. Thus Sister left the forest thicket and entered the palace, not as a captive, but as a bride. Beside her horse proudly stepped the stag with a golden ribbon on his neck, and people parted, marveling at the unseen spectacle. The wedding was celebrated for 7 days and 7 nights. Bells rang, wine flowed like a river, and all the people praised the young queen. Kind, modest, beautiful. Happy days stretched on. The king loved his wife with all his heart, and she answered him with tenderness and care. The stag frolicked in the royal garden among roses and fountains, ate juicy grass from the royal meadows, and no one dared to offend him, for the king himself called him brother. The old hut remained to rot in the forest, and in the palace blossomed a new life, full of light and love. It seemed all troubles were left behind forever. But fate only lay in wait, biding its time. A year passed, and joyful news flew around the whole kingdom. The young queen gave birth to a son, a beautiful, healthy boy with his mother's eyes and his father's smile. The king's happiness knew no bounds. He showered his wife with gifts and announced a feast for the whole world. Bells rang day and night. Heralds trumpeted about the christening, and even the sky seemed to shine brighter. But the ringing of bells flies far. It flew over fields and rivers, penetrated into the deepest thicket and reached the ears of the one who had long considered the hated children dead. The witch stepmother raised her head and listened. Her eyes flashed with black fire. The happiness in the palace shone too brightly and awakened envy, which never sleeps but only slumbers. In the deepest thicket, where the sun did not look in, stood a leaning house. There lived the witch with her daughter, an ugly, crooked maiden with one eye. They had long considered the children dead and rejoiced in this with black joy. But when the news of the young queen reached them, the witch turned white with rage. "Alive," she hissed, cracking her fingers. "She is alive, a queen, and she even gave birth to a son." The daughter whined with envy, scratching her ugly face. "This place should have been yours." The witch grabbed her by the shoulders. "You should have worn the crown. You should have given birth to the heir." Her hatred was like old wine. With the years, it became only stronger and more poisonous. "We will not simply kill her," whispered the witch, and her eyes lit up with hellish flame. "We will steal her life, all of it, to the last drop of happiness." And she began to prepare her most terrible plan. On that day, the king went hunting. The young queen, still weak after childbirth, remained in the palace with the infant and the faithful stag, who dozed at her feet. And the witch was already weaving her spells. She took the form of a kind old nanny, hunched, smiling, with gentle wrinkles around her eyes. She dressed her daughter as a maid and hid her ugliness under a bonnet. The guards let them through without questions. Who would suspect a toothless old woman? They walked through the corridors and entered the royal bedroom. The queen raised her head from the pillows and smiled. "What a kind grandmother," she whispered. "Have you come to help me with the baby?" "Of course, child," cooed the witch, and her voice oozed with honey. "I will take care of you." The wolf came to the sheep again, but his teeth were hidden behind a gentle smile, and Death stood at the head of the bed, dressed in a maid's dress. "You are quite pale, child," cooed the witch, bending over the queen. "You need to gather strength. I have prepared a healing bath. Steam from herbs will return your blush." The queen, suspecting nothing, allowed herself to be led to the bathhouse. She was so weak, so trusting. As soon as she crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her. The bolt clanged. "What are you doing?" screamed the queen, rushing to the door. But outside the flames were already crackling. The witch had stoked a hellish fire, and the heat was becoming unbearable. Smoke filled the bathhouse. The scorching air burned her chest. The queen beat on the door, called for help, but no one heard. The last cry died on her lips, and her soul, white as a swan's feather, fluttered out through a crack and melted into the night. And the witch was already dragging her ugly daughter into the royal bedroom. She laid her in bed, covered her head, whispered ancient words, and spells enveloped the room. Now everyone who looks at the impostor will see the former beauty. Thus in the hot steam of the bathhouse melted the life of the real queen, and in the cold sheets of her bed nested a lie. The king returned from the hunt at sunset. His heart yearned for his wife, and he ran up the stairs, barely throwing off his cloak. But at the bedroom doors, the hunched nanny met him. "Hush, your majesty," whispered the witch. "The queen is very sick. She needs rest and darkness. I beg you, do not open the curtains." The king tiptoed into the bedroom. In the thick gloom, he distinguished a silhouette on the bed, bent down, and kissed the hand lying on top of the blanket. "Get well, my love," he whispered. He looked with the eyes of love, and this love blinded him. Only the stag in the corner anxiously beat his hoof, not taking his eyes off the bed. He sensed it is not his sister lying there. There lies a foreign, hostile creature. But who will listen to a speechless beast? Midnight struck. The palace sank into sleep, and only the old nanny dozed by the cradle of the little heir. And then the door opened silently. A woman entered the room, pale as moonlight, transparent as morning mist. It was the real queen. Death had taken her body, but could not take her love. She floated to the cradle, took the infant in her arms, and pressed him to her breast. The baby did not cry. He recognized his mother. She fed him, quietly rocked him, and her lips silently whispered a lullaby. The nanny saw everything through a veil of sleep. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but her body did not obey, bound by an unknown force. The queen bent over the stag that slept by the cradle and stroked his head. Then she put the child back and melted in a moonbeam. She came from the world of shadows, led not by magic, but by love that knows no obstacles. Having laid down the child, the ghost of the queen turned around. In the corner, on a velvet rug, lay the stag. He was not sleeping. He was looking at her with his large, sad eyes. She floated to him and sank down nearby. The ghostly hand slid along his back. The stag felt no warmth, only a light breath, like from a butterfly's wing. "How are you, my brother?" she whispered. "How is life for you without me?" "Badly, sister," answered the stag, and his voice trembled. "By day they drive me away. Do not let me eat. But as long as you come at night, I live." "I will not leave you," she whispered. "I promised." Even having become a spirit, she remained a sister. Dawn was breaking outside the window. The ghost sighed, kissed the stag between the horns, and melted in the first rays of the sun, leaving behind only cold and longing. On the second night, the nanny did not sleep. She sat by the cradle, clutching prayer beads with whitened fingers. And again at midnight the door opened. Again the pale figure entered, again took the child, again stroked the stag. The nanny watched, not daring to breathe. It was not a dream. The ghost was real. Before dawn, the queen bent over the cradle for the last time. And then the nanny heard words that made the blood freeze in her veins. "I will come only one more time, and then I will disappear forever. My time is running out." The words hung in the air like the last toll of a bell. The thread connecting the dead with the world of the living was about to break. The ghost melted. The nanny jumped to her feet, trembling all over. She must tell the king. She must be in time, before it becomes too late. At dawn, the nanny rushed to the king. She fell at his feet, choking on words, and told everything. About the ghost, about the words of farewell, about the fact that time is running out. The king listened in silence. His heart clenched tighter and tighter. He remembered. His wife refused to open the curtains. She drove away the stag she had previously loved like a brother. She did not take her son in her arms. She had changed, and he convinced himself that it was illness. The nanny's story fell on the soil of his doubts, and the truth began to sprout through the lies. "I myself will keep watch tonight," said the king, and his voice strengthened. "I must see with my own eyes." This was his last chance. The third night came, the last one. The king hid behind a heavy curtain in the corner of the nursery. His heart pounded so loudly that he was afraid the ghost would hear. Midnight struck. The door opened silently. She entered, and the king barely held back a scream. It was she, his beloved. But how pale, how transparent. Through her shone the stars outside the window. She was fading, disappearing with every moment. The queen took the infant, pressed him to her breast, kissed him on the forehead. Then she bent to the stag and stroked him between the horns. "Farewell, my loved ones," she whispered, and in her voice sounded such longing that even the stones in the walls were ready to weep. "I will not come again. My time has run out." She was saying goodbye to the life that had been stolen from her, forever. The king could no longer remain silent. The king looked at the ghost, and his heart screamed louder than reason. These movements, only she bent over the cradle like that. This voice, only she sang like that. This tenderness in every gesture, hers, only hers. No magic could deceive a loving heart. He forgot the fear of the dead. He forgot caution. He burst from behind the curtain and rushed to the ghost. "It is you," he screamed, and his voice broke. "You are my wife, my real queen. I recognized you." The ghost turned around. In her eyes, empty and sad, a light suddenly flashed. Fear and hope, pain and joy mixed into one. "You see me?" she whispered. You remember? The king challenged death itself, calling her by name, and this name was the name of his love. I never forgot, he answered. The king stepped forward and embraced the ghost with his arms, tightly, desperately, as a drowning man grasps at a straw. His arms passed through cold, through emptiness, but he did not retreat. He tightened his embrace even more. I will not let you go, he screamed. Do you hear? I will not let go. And then began a struggle, invisible, terrible. Darkness pulled her into oblivion, and love held her in the world of the living. The ghost struggled in his arms, tore away, but the king did not loosen his embrace. And a miracle happened. From the warmth of his hands, from the strength of his faith, the spells of death began to crumble. The cold mist under his fingers thickened, gaining flesh. Paleness retreated, replaced by a living blush. The icy body became warm. The queen shuddered. She took a deep, convulsive breath, the first breath of a new life. Her eyes flew open, alive, shining. You saved me, she whispered. The ghost became a woman. The woman, a queen again. Love conquered death. The queen, trembling, told her husband everything. About the fake nanny, about the red-hot bathhouse, about the terrible substitution. The king's face turned to stone with anger. Guards, thundered his voice. To me. Torches flared, boots rumbled. Warriors burst into the royal bedroom and froze. On the bed, in silk sheets, writhed an ugly, one-eyed maiden, and nearby hissed an old woman whose face was melting, revealing the true form of the witch. The spells collapsed. The masks were torn off. Mercy, squealed the witch. But the king was implacable. You wanted to burn my wife? Fire will become your grave, and your daughter will be sent to that very thicket where you drove innocent children. The sentence was carried out at dawn. The evil that had tormented the family for so many years finally turned to ash. At the moment when the flame consumed the witch, the sky over the kingdom shuddered. The black cloud that invisibly hung over the palace all these terrible days trembled and began to melt. It crawled apart in shreds, thinned out, until it disappeared without a trace. Throughout the forest, evil spells were crumbling. Cursed brooks cleared, poisoned springs gushed with fresh water. Birds, silent from fear, sang all at once, so loudly that their song reached the very palace. The sun flared brighter, as if someone had wiped it like a dusty mirror. The air became fresh and sweet. The knot of the curse was cut. Magic, having lost its mistress, dissolved in the morning light like a bad dream upon waking. The world finally sighed freely. And at that same moment, the last miracle happened. The stag, lying by the cradle, suddenly threw up his head. His body was enveloped in a golden glow, warm, gentle, like a mother's embrace. Sister gasped. The king froze. Before their eyes, the deer hide trembled and began to melt. like snow under the spring sun. Slender legs straightened, hooves became feet, antlers dissolved in the light. The golden ribbon fell to the floor. It was no longer needed. And there before them stood not a beast, a man. A tall, slender youth with kind eyes and an open face. Brother. He slowly raised his hands, looked at them. Human, alive, and laughed. Then he looked at his sister, and tears of happiness glistened in his eyes. Sister, he uttered, and his voice sounded like music. I am me again. The beast was gone forever. The man remained, with a heart tempered in the forest silence and pure as gold. Sister cried out and rushed to her brother. He caught her up, spun her around, and they froze, tightly embracing, unable to unclasp their arms. How much they had gone through together. Hunger and thirst, fear and despair. He was a beast. She remained his sister. She was dead. He waited for her every night. They went through hell and returned. The king stepped to them and embraced both, his wife and his brother-in-law, who had become a brother to him not by blood, but by trials. Then all three bent over the cradle. The little heir slept, smiling in his sleep, unaware of what storms had swept over his head. The family was complete. The family was together. They won not by force of arms, but by force of loyalty. And now their embraces were stronger than any fortress walls. Brother remained to live at court. He became the king's right hand, a faithful friend and protector of his sister. No one forgot what they had gone through, and this memory made them only stronger. The queen ruled long and wisely. The people loved her for her kind heart, for justice, and for the fact that she never forgot what it was like to be poor and persecuted. They lived happily to a ripe old age, and no trouble dared cross the threshold of their house anymore. And the story of brother and sister flew around the world and became a legend about how true love and loyalty conquer any curse and even death itself. In the forest the brooks sang again, but now they sang not of curses, but of great love that passed through darkness and returned to the light.